Only 120 seconds, the scenario that could test Israel's defense readiness. For decades, the defense establishment of Israel has projected an aura of absolute technological invincibility. The sky above Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is guarded by one of the most sophisticated, multi-layered air defense architectures on the planet. Systems like the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow interceptors have successfully neutralized thousands of incoming threats, creating a psychological and physical shield over the nation's populace and its booming high-tech economy. To the outside world, this shield appears impenetrable. But behind the closed doors of the Curia, Israel's Ministry of Defense headquarters in Tel Aviv, military planners and strategic analysts do not deal in the illusion of absolute security. They deal in vulnerabilities. They run classified wargame simulations designed to probe the absolute limits of their own defenses. And currently, there is one specific theoretical scenario, a scenario lasting no more than 120 seconds, that is causing profound anxiety among the highest echelons of the Israeli military and intelligence communities. This scenario does not involve a massive ground invasion across multiple borders. It does not involve a nuclear detonation. It is far more surgical, far more calculated, and structurally devastating. It exposes the ultimate Achilles heel of the Israeli state, its existential reliance on a single, highly concentrated logistical chokepoint. That chokepoint is Ben Gurion International Airport. What makes this theoretical wargame so terrifying is not simply the explosive yield of the weapons involved. It is the ruthless application of military mathematics combined with the unforgiving realities of the global financial system. In this simulation, if the Islamic Republic of Iran decides to execute this specific strike package, their objective is not to defeat the Israel Defense Forces on a traditional battlefield. Their objective is to permanently sever the Israeli economy from the rest of the globalized world. To understand the mechanics of this doomsday simulation, we must first strip away conventional thinking about how air defense works. The Iron Dome is an engineering marvel. Its radar detects an incoming projectile. Its computers calculate the trajectory to determine if it threatens a populated area. And if it does, it fires an interceptor missile to destroy the threat in the sky. It is highly effective against the unguided, relatively slow-moving rockets frequently fired by regional militia groups. However, defense analysts point out a fundamental reality of all network defense systems. They possess a computational ceiling. There is a hard limit to the amount of data the system can process and the number of firing solutions it can generate simultaneously in a compressed time frame. The wargame scenario hypothesizes a coordinated strike, utilizing a small volley of advanced tactical ballistic missiles, such as the Iranian K-bar-Shaykan. These are not crude rockets. They are highly maneuverable in their terminal phase, descending from the upper atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. But the true danger in this simulation lies in the payload. If these missiles are not carrying a single, unified, high-explosive warhead, but are instead armed with cluster munitions, the entire defensive calculus changes in a fraction of a second. Imagine 12 ballistic missiles entering Israeli airspace. The radar systems track 12 distinct targets. The defense computers allocate interceptors accordingly. But then, just moments before impact, at a highly specific altitude, those 12 warheads open. Suddenly, each missile deploys 10 or perhaps a dozen independent submunitions. In the blink of an eye, the radar screen goes from displaying 12 targets to well over 120 distinct, maneuvering, high-velocity threats, all converging on a single geographic coordinate from multiple angles and trajectories. This is not a hardware malfunction. This is a deliberate, calculated, systemic overload. The defensive network simply does not possess the processing time or the physical interceptor inventory to engage over 100 independent targets in the final seconds of their descent. The mathematical probability of interception plummets. The shield is pierced. In the simulation, a critical percentage of these submunitions breach the defense network and strike the perimeter of Ben Gurion Airport. The targeting is not random. It is meticulously designed to achieve maximum operational paralysis. A handful of these submunitions crater the main runways. A runway designed for wide-body commercial aircraft is not merely a strip of asphalt. It is deeply engineered, reinforced concrete designed to withstand hundreds of thousands of pounds of impact upon landing. A crater 5 meters deep and 15 meters wide cannot simply be filled with gravel. It requires complex excavation, compaction, and specialized repaving that can take months to properly cure and certify for heavy international aviation. Other submunitions target the aircraft, parking aprons, and the jet. A1 fuel storage farms. Aviation fuel, when ignited by a kinetic strike, burns at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the aluminum and composite structures of modern commercial airliners simply melt. In this scenario, the domestic fleet of Israel's national carrier, El Al, alongside dozens of foreign wide-body jets parked overnight, would be entirely consumed. The structural integrity of the passenger terminals themselves would be critically compromised by the blast waves and subsequent fires. Within 120 seconds, the physical infrastructure of Israel's primary connection to the outside world is erased. But the physical destruction of concrete and metal is only the first phase of the catastrophe. To grasp the true strategic horror of this scenario, we must look at the unique geographic and economic reality of the state of Israel. Geopolitically speaking, Israel is an island. While it shares land borders with Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, its geopolitical situation renders these borders largely irrelevant for mass commercial transit. The borders to the north are hostile and heavily militarized. While there are peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, the infrastructure does not exist to support the massive, rapid transit of globalized trade via truck or rail through those nations to European or Asian markets. Israel does have highly capable seaports in Haifa and Ashdod, but maritime shipping is inherently slow and cannot support the specialized needs of a modern, 21st century economy. The modern Israeli economy is a high-tech powerhouse. It relies on the rapid export of microchips, advanced defense technology, pharmaceuticals, and precision medical equipment. It relies on a constant influx of international investors, corporate executives, and specialized technicians. It relies on emergency supply chains for highly specific industrial components that keep its domestic manufacturing running. All of this high-velocity, high-value economic activity is fundamentally reliant on air freight and international passenger aviation. Israel does have other airports, such as Ramon Airport near Eilat in the Deep South, or the smaller facility in Haifa. But these are regional airports. They lack the massive runway length, the specialized cargo handling facilities, and the sheer tarmac space required to accommodate the fleets of Boeing 777s, 787 Dreamliners, and Airbus, a 350S that facilitate global intercontinental trade. Ben Gurion is not just an airport. It is the singular lung through which the Israeli economy breathes. If that lung is collapsed, the Israeli economy begins to suffocate immediately. But the most insidious aspect of this war game scenario is that the suffocation continues long after the fires are put out and the concrete is poured. Let us assume, for the sake of the simulation, that the Israeli government initiates a massive, unprecedented wartime reconstruction effort. Army engineers work around the clock, and within just a few months, a main runway is completely repaired and certified. Temporary terminal facilities are erected. The airport is, physically speaking, ready to receive flights. It is at this exact moment that the second, invisible phase of the blockade begins. And this blockade is not enforced by Iranian missiles or military force. It is enforced by actuaries, risk analysts, and underwriters sitting in financial offices thousands of miles away in London. The entire global commercial aviation industry operates on the absolute foundation of insurance. A modern wide-body aircraft represents a capital investment of anywhere from $200 to $300 million. The liability associated with the passengers and cargo on board extends into the hundreds of millions more. No airline in the world, not Delta, not Lufthansa, not British Airways, will operate a flight without comprehensive insurance coverage for the hull, the crew, and third-party liabilities. The nerve center of global aviation and maritime insurance is the Lloyd's of London market. Within this market, specialized committees continuously monitor global conflicts and assess geopolitical risk. When an area becomes an active combat zone, these insurers issue what are known as war risk premiums. Airlines generally carry standard insurance for peacetime operations. But if they intend to fly into a zone where there is a demonstrated risk of military attack, they must purchase a specific war risk policy for that individual flight. In our war game scenario, the Iranian strike proved something catastrophic to the global insurance market. It proved that the Iron Dome system can be defeated by a swarming ballistic missile attack. It proved that Ben Gurion Airport is not a safe haven, but a viable, vulnerable military target. Once that precedent is established, the actuarial math changes instantly and violently. The risk analysts at Lloyd's and other major global insurers will recognize that the underlying threat has not been neutralized. Iran still possesses hundreds of those exact same missiles. The Iron Dome's computational limits have not fundamentally changed. Therefore, the risk of a second strike remains unacceptably high. Faced with this reality, the insurance market will react in one of two ways. They may impose war risk premiums that are so astronomically high that operating a commercial flight into Tel Aviv becomes entirely economically unviable. An airline cannot charge 10 times the normal ticket price just to cover the cost of the insurance premium for a single landing. Alternatively, and far more likely in the aftermath of a mass casualty destructive event, the insurers will simply declare Israeli airspace an uninsurable risk. They will completely refuse to underwrite any policy at any price for any aircraft landing at Ben Gurion. Without insurance, the aircraft do not fly. The airlines will legally and financially be prohibited from sending their fleets to Israel. This is the ultimate trap of the war game. The Israeli engineers could rebuild the runway perfectly, but it would remain a ghost airport. The blockade transitions from a physical military blockade into a permanent financial and legal quarantine. The airspace remains closed, not because there are fighter jets patrolling it, but because the global financial system refuses to accept the risk of crossing it. Even Israel's own national carrier, El Al, assuming it could somehow replace its destroyed fleet, would be paralyzed. If global reinsurers refused to back their operations, El Al planes would be grounded globally. Israel would find itself completely severed from the international aviation network. When military strategists analyze this scenario, the immediate question naturally turns to retaliation and deterrence. If Israel were subjected to such a devastating systemic attack, the conventional military doctrine dictates an overwhelming, disproportionate response to reestablish deterrence. The immediate impulse of the Israeli war cabinet would likely be to launch a massive counterstrike to destroy Iran's equivalent infrastructure. The primary target would be the Imam Khomeini International Airport in Tehran. Israeli F-35 stealth fighters and Jericho ballistic missiles are more than capable of reducing the Iranian airport to rubble. This presents a twisted historical parallel. In 2006, during the war in Lebanon, the Israeli Air Force famously bombed the runways of the Rafik Hariri International Airport in Beirut, arguing that Hezbollah was using the facility to import weapons. The international community heavily criticized the move, but it effectively paralyzed Lebanese air travel for weeks. In this modern war game, Iran is essentially executing the exact same strategic logic against Israel, but on a vastly more destructive scale. So, why wouldn't destroying Tehran's airport solve the problem for Israel? Strategic analysts point out that this is where the devastating asymmetry of the conflict truly reveals itself. A retaliatory strike against a massive civilian airport in Tehran would almost certainly result in the deaths of hundreds, if not thousands, of Iranian civilians. The international backlash against Israel would be immediate and severe. The images of a destroyed civilian terminal in Iran would likely shatter any remaining diplomatic support Israel maintains in Western capitals, potentially jeopardizing the vital resupply of American munitions and diplomatic cover at the United Nations. But even if we set aside international diplomacy and civilian casualties, striking Tehran's airport fails at the most basic strategic level. It does not solve Israel's fundamental problem. Destroying the airport in Tehran does not magically rebuild Ben Gurion. It does not convince the underwriters in London to reinstate aviation insurance for flights to Tel Aviv. And crucially, it does not fix the mathematical vulnerability of the Iron Dome against swarming ballistic cluster munitions. Furthermore, Iran is uniquely positioned to absorb this type of punishment. For over 4 decades, the Islamic Republic has operated under some of the most severe economic and diplomatic sanctions in modern history. The Iranian economy is already largely isolated from the Western financial system. They do not rely on a massive daily influx of international corporate executives, foreign tech investors, or global tourism to keep their state functioning. Their economy is built on a model of resistance and self-sufficiency, heavily reliant on black market oil exports and overland smuggling routes. Losing their primary international airport would be a significant blow to Iranian pride and logistics, but it would not induce systemic state collapse. Iran can survive being an island because it has been forced to act like one for 40 years. Israel, conversely, cannot. The Israeli economic miracle is entirely predicated on hyperconnectivity. It is a first world, westernized, highly integrated node in the global supply chain. If you cut the physical cables connecting a highly advanced computer to the internet, the computer becomes effectively useless, regardless of how powerful its internal processor is. In this war game scenario, Iran recognizes this profound asymmetry. They understand that they do not need to win a war of attrition against the Israel Defense Forces. They do not need to capture territory or occupy cities. The strategic logic is chillingly simple. Make the state of Israel economically unsustainable. By executing a highly concentrated, specialized strike against the singular bottleneck of Ben Gurion Airport, they isolate the country, paralyze its high-tech economic engine, and impose a staggering financial cost that will persist for years, long after any theoretical ceasefire is signed or political settlement is reached. This war game, studied quietly by defense intellectuals, illustrates the terrifying evolution of 21st century warfare. The concept of the front line has fundamentally shifted. The most devastating weapons are no longer just those that destroy armies. They are the weapons designed to exploit the fragile, highly optimized supply chains and financial networks that underpin modern civilization. Currently, this scenario remains confined to the realm of theoretical simulations and classified briefings. It is a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities inherent in a globalized world. But in the volatile theater of the Middle East, the distance between a theoretical war game and a catastrophic reality is often measured not in years or months, but in the sudden, unpredictable span of 120 seconds.